So, following that terror attack in Pahalgam, things are understandably, well, very tense here in India.
Extremely tense, yes.
And we're hearing that military responses against Pakistan are being looked at seriously. The prime minister's even given the armed forces full operational freedom.
That's the context. Exactly. A very serious situation.
But while, most talk is about the usual, the expected reactions along the border, we're going to dig into something a bit less obvious today. Something that might be a significant strategic asset. One that could be causing some real headaches, maybe even sleepless nights in Islamabad.
Right. Because while Pakistan is, quite logically, focusing its attention and defenses on its eastern border with India, the one they've always fortified,
Yeah, the main front.
we're going deep into a strategic advantage. India seems to have built up somewhere else entirely, unexpectedly perhaps,
Which is?
in Tajikistan. Specifically, India's significantly upgraded airbase there.
Okay, Tajikistan. And our information for this deep dive, it comes from where?
It's primarily based on a news report from the Economic Times dated May 6th, 2025.
Got it.
And our aim, really, is to unpack the strategic importance of this base, especially, right now, with tensions being so high.
Okay, let's start with Pakistan then. The article says they're basically bracing for an Indian military response, right? And looking east.
That's correct. They're anticipating something, and their gaze is firmly fixed eastward.
So what are they actually doing there on the eastern border?
Well, the report mentions a state of high alert. They've apparently activated air defenses, they're moving equipment, military hardware towards that frontier, conducting drills, the whole 9 yards.
Which makes sense. That's their historical posture, isn't it? Decades of focusing defense planning on India to the east.
Precisely. That's a very established defensive setup.
And the article, it makes an interesting point comparing this to their western border, right? Referencing the U.S. raid in Abbottabad back in 2011.
It does. It uses that as an example to suggest that historically, the western border, the one with Afghanistan, has been, let's say, less heavily fortified in comparison.
Right. Less of a perceived primary threat axis for them.
Yeah. And that's where this whole Tajikistan angle gets really interesting.
Because India has been developing something strategically much closer to that perhaps softer underbelly.
Exactly. We're talking about the Gisar military aerodrome. It's also known widely as the Aini Air Base.
Aini Air Base. Okay. Where is that exactly?
It's near Dushanbe, which is the capital of Tajikistan. And its location is, well, key.
How so?
Geographically, it's about, say, 600 kilometers or so from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And importantly, only about 150 kilometers from the border with Afghanistan.
Okay, so strategically positioned. Now, India's presence in Tajikistan, this isn't brand new, is it? There's a history there.
No, not at all. It goes back. India's engagement started back in the 1990s. There was a field hospital set up in Farkhor.
Farkhor, right, during the Afghan Civil War.
Yes, exactly. It was providing support, medical support, to the Northern Alliance fighting the Taliban.
I remember hearing about that. Didn't they treat Ahmad Shah Massoud there?
They did. Famously, he received treatment there in 2001, right after that assassination attempt, just before 9/11. Tragically, he didn't survive, but yes, he was treated at the Indian facility.
So it started more humanitarian, perhaps, but then evolved strategically. The article says the decision to really upgrade the Aini Air Base specifically came after a major world event.
That's right. The trigger, or at least the context, for the decision to significantly upgrade Aini was the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks.
Ah, okay. A shift in regional focus.
A big shift. It reflects a broader reassessment of strategic needs in Central Asia. And there were some key figures involved from the Indian side back then.
Like who?
Well, the Vajpayee government was in power. George Fernandez was the defense minister. And interestingly, people like Ajit Doval, who's the current NSA, and the former air chief B.S. Dhanoa, they were reportedly involved in pushing this project forward, too.
So high-level backing. And the funding, I think I read, wasn't from the standard defense budget.
That's another interesting detail. You're right. The funding actually came from the Ministry of External Affairs, the MEA.
MEA, not MALT. That's unusual.
It is. And the work itself was done by a private contractor alongside the Border Roads Organization, the BRO.
So MEA funding, BRO involvement, it really highlights the strategic, maybe even diplomatic importance placed on this beyond just pure military use.
I think that's a fair interpretation, yeah.
Yeah.
It signals a broader strategic investment.
So what did the upgrade actually involve? What changed at MEA? Was it just a lick of paint?
Oh, no, far from it. It was substantial. The main thing was extending the runway significantly.
How long?
To 3,200 meters. That's quite long. It basically allows a much wider range of aircraft to operate from there. Bigger planes, more advanced ones.
Like military transport, presumably. And maybe more.
Definitely heavy transports. But also, the support facilities were greatly improved: hangars, maintenance areas, communications, air traffic control towers, that sort of thing. And significantly, the article mentions reports, credible ones it seems, of temporary deployments of Su-30 MKI fighters there.
Su-30 MKIs, India's frontline fighters, stationed even temporarily in Tajikistan.
That's what's reported. Highly capable multi-role aircraft. Their presence, even temporarily, sends a strong signal.
Absolutely. So a really significant upgrade. And this base, it's not just sat there unused, right? The article mentions a real-world use case a few years back.
It does, yes. A very relevant example. During the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021, which was, pretty chaotic.
Understatement, yeah.
India used the I-90 airbase quite extensively. It became a vital staging post for evacuating Indian citizens.
How did they use it?
The Indian Air Force operated C-17 Globemasters and C-130J Super Hercules transport aircraft out of INI.
Big lifters.
Exactly. The article specifically highlights one mission where an IAF C-130J flew into Kabul, picked up 87 Indian nationals, and flew them safely back to Tajikistan.
Wow. Okay, so it proved its operational value right there in a real crisis?
Absolutely.
Ah.
Demonstrated its readiness and its strategic utility.
Okay, so let's connect this back to the present day, the current tensions with Pakistan. How does this base in Tajikistan suddenly become such a big deal? Why the sleepless nights you mentioned earlier?
Well, it's about the strategic dilemma it creates for Pakistan. Think about it. Their main focus, their resources, their high-end air defenses. They're overwhelmingly concentrated on the eastern border.
Right, where they expect the threat.
But Aini sits to their northwest. Its existence, especially in an upgraded state with potentially advanced aircraft operating from it, forces Pakistan to suddenly worry about a threat from a direction they've historically paid less attention to.
So it forces them to, spread their resources thinner?
Potentially, yes. They might feel compelled to divert some air defense assets, radar coverage, maybe even fighter squadrons, towards their western and northern borders to counter this potential threat vector.
Which, logically, could then weaken their defenses along the line of control and the international border with India, the very places they're trying to reinforce right now.
Precisely. It forces them to divide their attention, divide their resources. It introduces complexity and uncertainty into their defensive calculations.
That makes sense. It's not just about a direct attack from there, maybe?
Not necessarily, no. It's also hugely significant for ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
From Aini, India potentially has a platform to launch surveillance missions deep into Pakistani territory. The article gives some distances.
Yeah.
Peshawar is around 500 kilometers away.
Right.
Islamabad, Rawalpindi, and parts of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir are roughly 600 kilometers away. These are key strategic locations.
Well, within the range of modern surveillance aircraft or drones launched from Aini.
Exactly. And conducting these ISR missions might be, relatively speaking, easier than trying to penetrate the heavily defended eastern border.
Why is that?
Because the flight path could potentially be over Afghanistan. And Afghanistan currently doesn't possess a strong integrated air defense system.
Right. The airspace there is less contested, less risky for surveillance flights compared to the direct India-Pakistan border.
Considerably so. The article even points to the Wakhan corridor.
That narrow strip of Afghanistan between Tajikistan and Pak.
Yes. It suggests that could be a potential, less defended route for aircraft operating from INI to enter airspace closer to sensitive areas in northern Pakistan or Pak.
Okay, so this base isn't just a backup airstrip. It's a forward position that offers intelligence advantages and forces Pakistan into a difficult strategic calculation.
That's the core of it, I think. It provides strategic depth for India. It introduces an element of surprise, an unexpected axis.
It complicates Pakistan's defensive planning significantly.
Yes. It's not just about the kinetic potential, though that exists. It's about the intelligence picture it can provide, the way it forces the adversary to reposition and rethink, and the psychological pressure of a threat from an unanticipated direction.
So, summing this up then, the key takeaway is that this upgraded airbase in Tajikistan represents a potentially powerful strategic asset for India, especially now. It offers options, maybe forces Pakistan onto the back foot defensively, making them look over their shoulder, so to speak.
Exactly. It provides leverage, options, and unpredictability. It shifts the strategic calculus somewhat, away from just the traditional Eastern Front focus.
It really adds a fascinating, complex dimension to the whole situation. And it makes you think, doesn't it? Considering this kind of long-term strategic development, how might these established geopolitical calculations in the region change even more in the future? And, what other strategic assets, perhaps less visible ones, might be out there or being developed that could reshape things in ways we haven't even thought about yet?
That's the enduring question in strategic affairs, isn't it? What you don't see can sometimes be as important as what you do. Definitely food for thought.